Right now, as you are watching this video, violent offenders who should be locked up are walking the streets of Australia because our legal system has completely collapsed. Those charged with taking lives, serious assault, and violent offenses are being granted bail and released back into the community to commit more offenses while ordinary Australians live in fear.
Two teenagers among a gang of four accused of sexually assaulting a 17-year-old girl today asked to be released on bail.
A teenager is free on bail again after admitting he caused an innocent motorist's death that sparked uproar over bail laws. He has confessed to being high on drugs and speeding through Burwood in a stolen SUV before the deadly crash.
The driver who ploughed into Mr Taylor's car, just 17 years old, on bail, unlicensed, high on MDMA and in a stolen Jeep. He'd hit 129 kilometres an hour, ignoring his young passengers' pleas to slow down.
Inflicting this very public, very violent barrage of blows on a bus driver. Police say is Etchi Baketa Bayamungu, a 21-year-old from Sunnybank who spent last night behind bars. But by 2:45 this afternoon, bailed and back on the streets.
Horrendous allegations. Is there anything you want to say?
You might remember there was a really horrible case that broke last week about a 69-year-old man who was accused of raping a defenceless grandmother at knife point at her Melbourne West home more than 40 years ago. Well, today he was granted bail. His name is Michael Martin. This is the first time we have seen him publicly since he was arrested. He had nothing to say as he left the cells at the Melbourne Magistrates Court today after winning his bid for free.
I have a knife. Get into my car. I want to talk. That was the chilling threat made by this man, Warren McCorriston, more than 4 decades ago. Words a 16-year-old girl would never forget.
Are you sorry for what you did?
Only charged in 2024 and having since pleaded guilty to 1 count of detained for advantage, today the 64-year-old walked free.
This is not an exaggeration. This is not political rhetoric. This is the documented reality of what is happening in Australia today. Our courts are releasing dangerous offenders at record rates while crime statistics explode to levels not seen in decades. Today, I am going to show you exactly how broken our legal system has become, the horrific offenses being committed by people who should never have been released, and why this collapse threatens the safety of every Australian family.
I'm concerned that it's never ending. That it doesn't matter where you go. I've just come to Nightcliffe just to have a coffee. Noticed all the shops' windows along here have been smashed.
All these shop owners have to... This is all at their own expense. It's just not fair. It's just not fair on us shop owners that have to deal with this. We're crying out for help and nothing is happening. We're being silenced. It's just not fair.
The crime explosion. Nobody wants to talk about. Let me start with the numbers that prove our legal system is failing catastrophically. In Victoria alone, 627,268 criminal offences were recorded in the 12 months to March 2025. That is an increase of 91,692 offences, or 17.1% from the previous year. When adjusted for population, Victoria's offence rate per 100,000 people reached 8,838.7, marking a 15.2% rise. Police arrested 25,917 people, a combined 75,968 times in that year. That is 208 arrests per day, the highest number since electronic records began in 1993.
New data has revealed crime in Victoria has soared to its highest level in more than 2 decades, largely due to a spike in youth crime and repeat youth offending. Victoria Police are arresting 200 people each day, and authorities say that result is unacceptable. Youth crime is up 16% year on year, as is repeat youth offending, with 7,400 offenders arrested 24,000 times. Crimes committed by children under 18 also rose to their highest levels since records began in 1993.
But here is what makes these numbers truly terrifying. Youth offending has exploded by 17.9%, reaching record levels for the second quarter in a row. Children aged 10 to 17 now account for 63.1% of all robberies, 46% of aggravated burglaries, and 26.9% of car theft. Car theft itself has increased by 47.1% to its highest levels since 2002. There has been a 73% increase in stolen cars being involved in collisions, 6 of which have resulted in fatalities. Theft from motor vehicles is up 39.3%, retail theft up 38.6%, and theft of number plates up 49.6%. These are not just statistics. These represent hundreds of thousands of victims whose lives have been destroyed by offenders who should have been in prison, but were instead walking free because our courts keep granting them bail.
Good evening. A former immigration detainee, controversially released by the High Court, is back behind bars, accused of a brutal Melbourne bashing that's left a victim clinging to life.
The 43-year-old laughed as he fronted court today, telling the magistrate it was all a joke to him.
The Molly Tyhurst tragedy that exposed the system. April 6, 2024. Dubbo Local Court. A Saturday morning that would seal the fate of a young woman 400 kilometres away.
She was a 28-year-old country girl, but Australia came to know her. Molly Tyhurst, a loving mum, a passionate childcare worker, and an alleged victim of a national scourge. Today, her family and friends said goodbye on a football field in her hometown of Forbes in the Central West. Her 6-year-old son had this message: "I love you, I wish you were here, you were the best mum in the world."
Molly Tyhurst was 28 years old, a childcare worker in the small town of Forbes, New South Wales. Every morning, she would arrive at work with a smile, ready to care for the children whose parents trusted her with their most precious gifts. But Molly was living a nightmare that nobody could see. Her ex-partner, Daniel Billings, 29, had been stalking her, following her, threatening her. The charges against him painted a terrifying picture: 3 counts of serious assault and 4 counts of stalking and intimidating behavior. This was not a lover's quarrel gone wrong. This was a predator systematically terrorizing his victim. On that Saturday morning in Dubbo, Billings sat in the dock, knowing that his freedom hung in the balance. But he also knew something that Molly did not. He knew that the system was rigged in his favor. Because it was a weekend, no magistrate was available. Instead, a registrar would decide his fate. Not a trained judge. Not someone with years of experience assessing dangerous offenders. A court administrator whose job was usually processing paperwork. The police prosecutor stood up. This was the moment when the system should have protected Molly. This was when someone should have said that a man accused of serious assault and stalking was too dangerous to be on the streets. Instead, the prosecutor said words that would haunt Molly's family forever. These are always difficult ones, Registrar, because the defendant has got no criminal history. But the allegations are quite serious. He acknowledged the allegations were serious. Then he did nothing to oppose bail.
I'm a bit surprised, to be honest, that a registrar was making this decision. I would have thought should have been done by a magistrate.
Billings walked free with what the court called strict conditions. Pieces of paper that promised he would stay away from Molly. Words on a document that could not stop what was coming next. For 2 weeks, Molly lived in terror. She went to work each day, caring for other people's children while wondering if her attacker was watching her, waiting for her, planning his next move. On April 21, 2024, Molly Tyhurst was found deceased at her home. The man who should have been in custody was charged with her domestic violence-related passing and breaching an apprehended violence order. Molly Tyhurst would be alive today if our legal system had done its job, if the prosecutor had opposed bail, if the registrar had refused it, if the system had prioritized community safety over the rights of accused offenders. Instead, a young woman who dedicated her life to caring for children is gone because our courts decided that a man accused of serious assault and stalking should be free to walk the streets.
At the start of the month, he was charged with multiple domestic violence and rape offences and slapped with an AVO. The following day, a registrar granted him bail.
It's been a living hell for Molly. She's been living in fear for months on end.
She was so frightened she changed her locks and installed cameras.
It's been a very severe injustice to our family and many other families.
The youth offender known as MMA, when children become predators. In the files of Victoria's youth courts, there is a case that has become a symbol of everything wrong with our bail system. The offender is known only as MMA, his identity protected because he is under 18, but his victims know exactly who he is.
By night, soaring youth crime has locals traumatised.
MMA has been charged with multiple violent offences, including aggravated burglary and assault. These are not schoolyard fights or teenage pranks. These are serious violent offences that would see an adult locked up immediately. But MMA is 17 years old, and in Australia, that means he gets treated like a misguided child rather than a dangerous predator. The families whose homes he has invaded tell a different story. They describe the terror of waking up to find strangers in their house, the sound of breaking glass, the sight of masked figures moving through their hallways, the screams of their children who thought they were safe in their own beds.
On Monday, he and his fiancée were woken by an intruder.
I didn't really have a chance to think. It was, fight or flight.
But when MMA appears in court, the focus is not on his victims. It is on his age, his background, his potential for rehabilitation. The court sees a teenager who deserves another chance. His victims see a predator who should be locked up. So MMA gets bail, again and again. Each time he is arrested, each time he appears in court, each time he promises to change his ways, and each time he is released back into the community to terrorize more families. This is not rehabilitation. This is not justice. This is a system that has decided the feelings of violent offenders are more important than the safety of innocent families. The car theft epidemic turning deadly. The statistics are chilling. Car theft by young offenders has increased by 47.1% to its highest level since 2002. But behind those numbers are real stories of terror and tragedy. A 15-year-old uses electronic devices to reprogram car keys and steal vehicles. This teenager has no license, no training, and no regard for human life. They drive at high speeds through residential areas where families walk their dogs, children ride bikes, and elderly people cross streets. In the past year, there has been a 73% increase in stolen cars being involved in collisions. 6 of these crashes have resulted in fatalities. 6 families have lost loved ones because our courts decided that teenage car thieves deserve bail. One family was driving home from dinner when a stolen car ran a red light at high speed. The driver was a teenager who had been arrested multiple times for car theft but kept getting bail. In the seconds before impact, this family had no idea that their lives were about to end because our legal system decided that a repeat car thief deserved another chance. The teenager walked away from the crash with minor injuries. The family did not. At the funeral, relatives learned that the person responsible had been arrested for car theft multiple times, but was always released on bail. This pattern has repeated itself 6 times in the past year. 6 families destroyed because our courts refuse to keep dangerous young offenders in custody. The systematic failure of bail decisions. The Molly Tyhurst case is not an isolated incident. It is part of a systematic pattern of bail decisions that prioritize the rights of offenders over the safety of victims and the community. Former magistrate David Heilpern admitted that if police had opposed Billings' bail, most registrars would have refused it. But police prosecutors across Australia are failing to oppose bail applications for violent offenders, even when the evidence clearly shows they pose a danger to the community. This is happening because our legal system has been captured by an ideology that treats offenders as victims and victims as inconveniences. Defense lawyers argue that their clients have rights. Legal aid organizations claim that keeping dangerous people in custody violates their human rights. Civil liberties groups insist that bail should be the default position. Meanwhile, the actual victims and potential future victims are ignored. Their rights to safety, security, and life are considered less important than the comfort and convenience of accused offenders. The result is a system where violent offenders are routinely released on bail to commit more offenses while they wait for trials that may not happen for months or years. The revolving door justice system. What we have created in Australia is a revolving door justice system where the same offenders are arrested, released and arrested again in an endless cycle that achieves nothing except more victims. Police are arresting record numbers of people, but those arrests are meaningless if the courts immediately release them back onto the streets. Officers are spending their time processing the same offenders over and over again instead of preventing new offenses. This revolving door system is particularly obvious with youth offenders. The same teenagers are being arrested multiple times for serious offenses, granted bail each time, and sent back into the community to commit more offenses. The courts justify this by claiming that detention should be a last resort for young people. But when that young person has been arrested 5, 10, or 15 times for serious offenses, at what point does community safety become more important than their rehabilitation prospects? The answer, apparently, is never. Our legal system has decided that no matter how many offenses a young person commits, no matter how violent those offenses become, they should always be given another chance to reform themselves while living in the community. The domestic violence bail scandal. Domestic violence cases represent some of the most dangerous bail decisions being made by our courts. Persons who have been charged with serious violence against their partners are being routinely released to return to the same communities where their victims live. The Molly Tyhurst case is just one example of how this policy is getting women harmed. Across Australia, women are being harmed by persons who were on bail for previous domestic violence charges. The pattern is always the same. A person is charged with domestic violence. They apply for bail. Their lawyer argues that they have no previous offense history, that they will comply with conditions, that they pose no risk to the community. The court grants bail with conditions like staying away from the victim. Then the person violates those conditions, escalates their violence, and seriously harms their former partner. The court expresses regret, orders a review, and promises to do better next time. But next time, the same thing happens again. This is not a failure of individual judges or magistrates. This is a systematic failure of a legal system that refuses to acknowledge that domestic violence is inherently dangerous and that persons who commit it are likely to escalate to more serious harm. By the way, if you are tired of watching offenders walk free while victims suffer, hit that subscribe button for more unfiltered truth about what is really happening in Australia. The retail theft explosion destroying communities. Retail theft has increased by 38.6%. But let me tell you what this really means for the people whose lives are being destroyed. A small family business that has operated for decades now faces a daily invasion. Groups of teenagers walk in, fill their bags with merchandise, and walk out while the owners watch helplessly. When they call police, they are told that even if the thieves are caught, they will probably get bail. These business owners watch their life savings disappear as thieves steal their inventory. They cannot afford security guards. They cannot afford to replace stolen goods. Some are forced to close their businesses because they cannot survive the constant theft. The employees of these businesses live in fear. They are threatened and intimidated by thieves who know there will be no consequences for their actions. Some quit their jobs because they don't feel safe at work. This is not victimless offense. This is the systematic destruction of small businesses and the livelihoods of the families who depend on them. The aggravated burglary horror. Youth offenders account for 46% of aggravated burglaries in Victoria. But let me tell you what an aggravated burglary actually means for the families who experience it. This is not someone sneaking into an empty house to steal a television. This is armed intruders breaking into occupied homes while families are inside. A family is watching television when they hear glass breaking. Masked figures burst through their door carrying weapons. Children start screaming. Parents grab phones to call police. They do not know if these intruders want their belongings or their lives. The psychological trauma from this experience lasts for years. Children develop anxiety and cannot sleep in their own beds. Parents install security systems and live in constant fear. Families sometimes move houses because they cannot feel safe in their own homes. Then they discover that the persons who terrorized their family were granted bail and are free to do this to other families. They learn that these offenders had done this before and were on bail when they invaded their home. This is the reality for hundreds of Australian families every year. They are victimized by persons who should have been in custody, and then they watch as those same persons are granted bail to victimize others. The economic cost of bail failures. The collapse of our bail system is not just costing lives. It is costing taxpayers billions of dollars in police resources, court time, and victim support services. When the same offenders are arrested multiple times for different offenses, police have to investigate each offense separately. Court time is wasted processing repeat offenders who should have been in custody. Victim support services are overwhelmed dealing with people who have been traumatized by offenders who should never have been free. The economic cost of a single serious incident like Molly Tyhurst includes police investigation costs, court proceedings, victim compensation, and the lost economic contribution of the victim over their lifetime. These costs easily run into millions of dollars per case. But the real economic cost is the destruction of community confidence in the justice system. When people do not feel safe in their homes, their businesses, or their communities, economic activity declines. Tourism suffers, investment decreases, property values fall. Entire communities are being destroyed by offense waves that could be prevented if our courts simply kept dangerous offenders in custody until their trials. The political response that changes nothing. Politicians love to talk tough on offending when these scandals break. They announce new laws, tougher penalties, and stricter bail conditions. They hold press conferences promising that things will change. But nothing ever changes because the fundamental problem is not the laws. The problem is the culture within our legal system that prioritizes the rights of offenders over the safety of the community. After Molly Tyhurst was harmed, the New South Wales government announced a review of bail laws and promised tougher conditions for domestic violence offenders. Victoria introduced new bail laws that supposedly make it harder for repeat offenders to get bail. But these changes are largely cosmetic. The same judges and magistrates who were granting inappropriate bail before these changes are still making the same decisions today. The same prosecutors who were failing to oppose dangerous bail applications are still failing to do their jobs. The same legal aid lawyers who argue that every offender deserves bail regardless of their history are still making the same arguments. The same civil liberties groups who claim that community safety is less important than individual rights are still influencing policy. Until we change the culture that treats offenders as victims and victims as inconveniences, no amount of new laws will fix this broken system. The international embarrassment. Australia's bail system has become an international embarrassment. Other developed countries look at our offense statistics and our bail decisions with disbelief. In the United States, people charged with serious violent offenses are routinely held without bail until trial. In the United Kingdom, bail is refused for defendants who pose a risk to public safety. In Canada, the courts have clear guidelines for when bail should be denied. But in Australia, we have created a system where bail is almost automatic, regardless of the seriousness of the charges or the danger posed by the defendant. This is not because we are more civilized or more respectful of human rights than other countries. It is because our legal system has been captured by ideologues who care more about abstract principles than real-world consequences. The result is that Australia has become a soft target for offenders who know they can commit serious offenses and still be released on bail to commit more offenses while they wait for trial. The victim impact that nobody discusses. While politicians and lawyers debate the rights of offenders, the victims of our failed bail system are forgotten and ignored. Molly Tyhurst family has to live with the knowledge that she would be alive today if the system had done its job. The families of the 6 people harmed in crashes involving stolen cars have to cope with preventable losses. The thousands of people who have been robbed, assaulted, and burglarized by offenders on bail have to deal with trauma that could have been avoided. But the impact goes beyond the direct victims. Every person living in a community plagued by offending suffers from the failure of our bail system. Elderly people who are afraid to leave their homes, parents who worry about their children walking to school, business owners who face constant theft and vandalism. These people are the real victims of our legal system collapse. They are the ones paying the price for a system that prioritizes the comfort of offenders over the safety of the community. Their voices are never heard in the legal debates about bail reform. Their experiences are never considered when judges make bail decisions. Their rights are never mentioned when civil liberties groups argue for the presumption of bail. The corruption of legal education. Part of the problem with our bail system is that lawyers and judges are being trained in law schools that teach them to see offenders as victims of society rather than people who choose to harm others. Law students are taught that offending is caused by poverty, disadvantage, and social inequality. They are told that punishment does not work and that rehabilitation should always be the priority. They are indoctrinated with the belief that keeping people in custody is inherently wrong. This ideological training creates lawyers and judges who are more concerned with the welfare of offenders than the safety of their victims. They see bail decisions through the lens of social justice rather than community protection. The result is a legal profession that consistently advocates for the release of dangerous offenders while dismissing the concerns of victims and the community. This corruption of legal education means that even when politicians pass tougher bail laws, the people implementing those laws are ideologically opposed to using them effectively. The media complicity in covering up failures. The mainstream media plays a crucial role in covering up the failures of our bail system by refusing to ask hard questions about why dangerous offenders are being released. When someone on bail commits a serious offense, the media focuses on the offense itself rather than the bail decision that made it possible. They interview police about their investigation and politicians about their response, but they rarely question why the perpetrator was free in the first place. This media complicity allows the legal system to avoid accountability for its failures. Judges and magistrates who make inappropriate bail decisions are never named or questioned. Prosecutors who fail to oppose dangerous bail applications are never held accountable. The result is that the public remains largely unaware of how systematically our bail system is failing and how many offenses could be prevented if dangerous people were kept in custody. The technology excuse that solves nothing. One of the latest trends in bail reform is the use of electronic monitoring devices like ankle bracelets to track people released on bail. Politicians love these devices because they sound high-tech and modern, but electronic monitoring does nothing to prevent offending. It can tell you where someone was when they committed an offense, but it cannot stop them from committing it. A domestic violence perpetrator wearing an ankle bracelet can still seriously harm their former partner. A car thief with electronic monitoring can still steal cars. A burglar being tracked can still break into homes. These devices create a false sense of security while allowing dangerous offenders to remain in the community. They are a technological band-aid on a systemic problem that requires real solutions. The only way to prevent someone from committing offenses while on bail is to not grant them bail in the first place. The international syndicate exploitation. Australia's weak bail system is being exploited by international syndicates who send operatives here knowing they will be released, even if caught. Drug trafficking organizations use Australia as a soft target because they know their couriers and distributors will get bail even when caught with large quantities of illegal substances. Money laundering operations flourish because the people running them know they will be released to continue their activities while awaiting trial. Human trafficking networks exploit our bail system by sending people here who can continue their operations even after being arrested. Cybercrime groups use Australia as a base because they know they will get bail even when caught running sophisticated fraud operations. This international exploitation of our weak bail system is turning Australia into a haven for global offense organizations who see us as an easy target. The generational impact on young Australians. The collapse of our bail system is having a devastating impact on young Australians who are growing up in communities plagued by offending. Children who should be playing safely in their neighborhoods are instead living in fear of youth gangs who know they will face no real consequences for their actions. Teenagers who should be focused on their education are instead dealing with the trauma of being victims of offenses committed by people who should have been in custody. Young people are losing faith in the justice system because they can see that it does not protect them or their families. They are learning that offending pays and that offenders are treated better than victims. This generational impact will last for decades as these young people grow up with the understanding that the law does not protect them and that they cannot rely on the system to keep them safe. The point of no return. We are rapidly approaching a point of no return where our legal system will be so broken that it cannot be fixed. When offenders know they will get bail regardless of their offense history, when victims know the system will not protect them, when communities know they are on their own, the social contract that holds society together begins to break down. We are seeing the early signs of this breakdown already. Vigilante justice, community groups taking law enforcement into their own hands, business owners arming themselves because they know police cannot protect them. This is not the Australia that previous generations built for us. This is not the safe, prosperous country that we want to leave for our children. The solution that nobody wants to implement. The solution to our bail crisis is simple but politically difficult. We need to return to a system where community safety is the primary consideration in bail decisions. This means that people charged with serious violent offenses should be held in custody until trial. It means that repeat offenders should not be granted bail regardless of their age. It means that domestic violence perpetrators should be kept away from their victims by being locked up, not by being given conditions they can easily violate. It means that prosecutors should oppose bail applications for dangerous offenders instead of treating them as routine administrative matters. It means that judges and magistrates should prioritize community safety over the convenience of defendants. Most importantly, it means changing the culture within our legal system that treats offenders as victims and victims as inconveniences. But this solution requires political courage that our leaders do not possess. It requires acknowledging that our current approach has failed catastrophically. It requires admitting that the ideology driving our legal system is wrong. Until we have leaders willing to make these changes, the bail crisis will continue to get worse. More innocent people will be harmed, and more communities will be destroyed by preventable offending. The time for half measures and political rhetoric is over. The time for real change is now. To see more about how Australia's institutions are failing ordinary people, click this video here.